Why I Think Trump is Laying the Groundwork to Rig the 2028 Election by Marlowe. Okay, this might sound like a strange subject for a Minecraft PvP player to write about, but elections are not that different from competitive games in one important way. The rules have to apply equally to everyone. You cannot call a match fair when the server owner lets one team play normally, but threatens, removes, or scares away players from the other team. You cannot change the rules halfway through, delete certain players from the list, and then celebrate when your preferred side wins. That is not winning fairly. That is controlling the match. And that is why I believe Donald Trump may be laying the groundwork to rig the 2028 election, not necessarily by changing ballots inside a voting machine, but by manipulating who is allowed to participate, who feels safe enough to vote, and who controls the election process. Let me be clear about something before people intentionally misunderstand me. I do not have a leaked document titled Trump's Secret Plan to Rig 2028. That is not what I am claiming. I am looking at what his administration is doing publicly, and I am asking where those actions could lead. He still cannot accept that he lost in 2020. Trump continues to insist that the 2020 election was rigged despite courts, election officials, and investigations failing to establish fraud capable of changing the result. The documents promoted during his July 2026 election speech did not prove that the result was fraudulent either. At some point, this stops looking like someone sincerely investigating a past election. It starts looking like someone building an excuse for a future one. Trump has created a simple rule for his supporters. When Trump or his allies win, the election was fair. When Democrats win, the election must have been stolen. That is not election integrity. That is a refusal to recognize any result that does not benefit your own political movement. You do not have to alter ballots to rig an election. When most people hear rigged election, they imagine somebody secretly changing vote totals. But there are other ways to corrupt an election. You can improperly remove eligible voters from registration lists. You can make voting unnecessarily difficult in areas that support your opponent. You can intimidate people near polling locations. You can threaten state officials until they surrender control or sensitive voter information. You can undermine independent election agencies. You can announce before Election Day that any loss must be fraudulent. The result is influenced before some voters ever reach a ballot box. That is what worries me. The administration is pressuring states for voter information. The Trump administration has pushed states to provide extensive voter roll information. Courts have rejected or restricted some of these demands, partly because inaccurate or outdated government data could cause eligible voters, including naturalized citizens, to be wrongly flagged or removed. In July 2026, the Justice Department warned state election officials that they could potentially face criminal charges over alleged non-citizen registrations. DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin then threatened consequences against states that refused to cooperate with additional federal demands, while DHS did not publicly provide evidence supporting its large estimates. Reuters. Ask yourself 3 questions. Why are they threatening state officials before proving the allegations? Why are they demanding sensitive voter data while repeatedly claiming elections are fraudulent? And who gets hurt when inaccurate databases wrongly identify eligible voters? A government saying, "Trust us, these people should not be voting," is not evidence. Evidence is evidence. The ICE question should not be dismissed. The White House previously said Trump had no formal plans to deploy ICE agents at polling locations, but it declined to rule out agents being present nearby. Trump also called for Republicans to nationalize or take over voting in certain locations. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche later declined to give an unequivocal promise that federal agents would remain away from polling places. Maybe they never do it. I hope they do not. But refusing to rule it out matters. Imagine armed immigration agents appearing primarily around polling locations in Democratic cities or immigrant communities. Even eligible American citizens might stay home because they are frightened for themselves or their relatives. The agents would not need to tell anyone, "Do not vote for a Democrat." Their presence could deliver the message. Federal law prohibits intimidating or attempting to intimidate people to interfere with their right to vote or their choice of candidate. Federal law also restricts federal officials from bringing armed personnel to election locations and prohibits officials from using government authority to interfere with federal elections. U.S. Code. Sending federal agents to selected opposition-leaning polling areas for political purposes would not be election security. It would be voter intimidation. Independent election institutions are being weakened. Trump also removed Democratic members of the Bipartisan Election Assistance Commission in July 2026, while its remaining Republican member resigned. That left the federal commission responsible for election administration guidance and voting system standards without its normal bipartisan leadership. Reuter's order, his administration also attempted to impose new mail voting restrictions through an executive order, but a federal judge blocked those provisions after states argued that the president was unlawfully interfering with their constitutional authority to administer elections. Reuter's order, one isolated action might be explained away. But when you combine voter data demands, threats against state officials, attacks on mail voting, talk about taking over elections, refusal to rule out federal agents near polls, and the removal of independent election commissioners, a pattern begins to appear. That pattern is why I am concerned about 2028. Trump would not need to be the candidate. The 22nd Amendment says that a person cannot be elected president more than twice. Trump therefore could not legally win another presidential election in 2028 after being elected in 2016 and 2024. Congress.gov, but that does not mean he would have no interest in controlling the election. He could attempt to help a chosen Republican successor. He could try to protect his political movement. He could pressure candidates to promise him protection. He could attempt to keep control of Congress and federal agencies. This is bigger than whether Trump's own name appears on a ballot. It is about whether one political movement gets to decide which voters count and which election results are considered legitimate. This is projection. Trump constantly accuses Democrats of rigging elections without producing evidence that they changed the outcome of 2020. Meanwhile, his own administration is trying to expand federal power over state election systems. That is why this feels like projection. Accuse everyone else of planning to cheat. Convince your supporters that normal election losses are impossible. Then present your own interference as necessary to stop fraud. No. You do not protect democracy by threatening election officials. You do not secure an election by scaring eligible voters. You do not restore trust by declaring that only your victories are legitimate, and you do not get to call an election fair after manipulating the rules to help your preferred side. I cannot prove today exactly what Trump will attempt in 2028. But I do not think people should wait until Election Day to begin paying attention. By then, voter lists may already have been changed. Officials may already have been replaced or intimidated. Rules may already have been rewritten. People may already have decided that voting is too dangerous. In Minecraft, you do not wait until the corrupted server owner deletes half the player base before asking whether something is wrong. You look at the pattern, you save the evidence, and you speak before the damage becomes permanent. That is what I am doing now. Anyway, that is my opinion. Now I'm going back to Minecraft.